October 23rd, 1943. In 1852, U.S. author, abolitionist, and freed slave Frederick Douglass, speaking on the fight for freedom, said that it is not light that we need, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. Douglass was speaking of the force of rhetoric, but 9 decades later, the United Nations Alliance make those words literal when once again, they bring a storm of fire to a German city. This is War Against Humanity, a series of World War II in real time. I'm Spartacus Olsson. Last week, the U.S. Army Air Force suspended operations over Germany because of heavy losses again after only a week of renewed operations. Inside Germany, there were signs that the bombing was hardening civilian resolve to stand with their country and the Nazi regime. In Rome, the Vatican helped several thousand Jews to go into hiding, but 1,259 Roman Jews were arrested and sent to the Auschwitz camp complex. At the Sobibor extermination camp, the prisoners rose up, killed many of the SS tormentors, and 100 of them escaped. Now, there haven't been that many new developments in the war against humanity in Southeast Asia in the past few months. With Japan held up by the Allied advances in the Pacific and stalemate in China, new horrors have not begun, but the daily drip of terror, of enslavement, torture, and murder for the hundreds of thousands of civilians and POW held in Japanese camps have, of course, continued. One of the projects they have been forced to toil on completes this week. On October 17th, 11 months after construction began, the Burma Railway is completed. It connects Bangkok, Thailand with Rangoon, Burma, and is quite an engineering feat with 600 bridges through jungle, swampy fields, rocky hills, and meandering waterways. A feat carried out by working over 100,000 human beings to death, some 90,000 local slaves, and 12,000 POW, mainly British, Dutch, and Australian. To the west, in Bengal, British India, the man-made famine has continued. One of the positions with the most power to alleviate the situation is the Viceroy of India, which for the last 7 years has been Lord Linlithgow. As announced earlier this year, Archibald Wavell replaces him on October 20th. On his way out, Linlithgow messages Leo Amery, Secretary of State for India. I shall not propose to weary you with arguments or representations on any aspect of the Indian problem, for I shall be functus, and it will be for my successor to carry the burden. But broadly speaking, I can feel as I lay down this great charge that I leave the country in a pretty good trim. A trim that in October 1943 means that there are few places in Bengal not ravaged by daily starvation deaths. Indian newspapers are filled with reports on corpse-filled streets and gruesome anecdotes of individual suffering. On October 10th, weekly newspaper Biplapi reports that a man driven by hunger was eating food grains scattered along the railway tracks. Seeing this, members of the railway police started pelting him with stones. The man started running and fell into a ditch alongside the track where he died. Linlithgow is right that it's no longer his issue to handle, though. But unlike his predecessor, Wavell has empathy for the millions of civilians suffering under his government's rule. Within days, he sets up a distress relief fund. Solving the famine will be one of his top priorities, and unlike his predecessor, he is about to travel to investigate the situation with his own eyes. For many Bengalis, it's too little, too late, though. Roughly 1 million people have already died from hunger or by famine-induced diseases, and no matter what Wavell does, it's not going to end soon enough for many more. Whatever Wavell does will also not heal the already deepened wounds left by British colonial oppression that has only fanned the flames of the fire beacon signaling that Indian independence must come now. On October 21st, Indian nationalist Subhas Chandra Bose forms the Provisional Government of Independent India, Azad Hind, with himself as head of state. In his declaration, he pledges that it will be the task of the provisional government to launch and conduct the struggle that will bring about the expulsion of the British and their allies from the soil of India. He also incorporates the Indian National Army, recruiting from Indian nationals living in Japanese-occupied territories, as well as Indian POW who had fought in the British armies in Southeast Asia, and vows that they will fight with the Axis powers. In Europe, some British and German POW are, for the first time, about to return home. Roughly 40,000 British and Commonwealth servicemen have been held in German captivity since France fell in June 1940. In later years, that number grew with captured aircrews and soldiers fighting in North Africa and Italy, also adding US servicemen to the count. Germany and the Western Allies discussed the exchange of heavily wounded and sick prisoners already back in 1940, but ultimately that never happened. Now, on October 19th, the first of sick and wounded 5,000 Allied, mainly British, POW are taken by the Germans to neutral territories in Sweden and Spain. From there, they are ferried back to the UK. In return, Germany receives 6,000 of its own prisoners. Sweden. That is also where most of the 8,000 Danes and foreigners residing in Denmark of Jewish faith, ethnicity, or family have by now escaped. Back in Denmark, a diplomatic communication between SS Obergruppenführer Werner Best, in charge of the German occupation, and his employers at the Foreign Office in Berlin hints at the delusions driving the Nazi genocide of the Jews. Best has been asked by Berlin to expand on the situation of Jewish espionage and sabotage now that the Jews are gone. He answers that in Denmark, police investigations and court proceedings have not been able to establish any cases of Jewish espionage or sabotage activity. But it's not like Best has abandoned his Nazi delusions of a war on Germany by Jewry. Instead, he has another explanation for this mysterious absence of Jewish opposition. The Jews in Denmark have, since occupation by German troops began, held back in fear of actions like the one that eventually came on the 2nd of the 10th, 43. But then he offers a comment that almost sounds like rebuke of his own side. When, on the 2nd of the 10th, 43, that the Jews had morally and materially supported sabotage was given as a justification for the deportation of the Jews, this was solely to justify the action without any concrete evidence at hand. And while Best equivocates at Sobibor, the camp is closed down, and a group of the Foreign Auxiliary Guards have begun turning the facility into an innocuous farm. Similar things are happening at the other Operation Reinhardt camp. At Bevchech, the barracks and facilities have been dismantled. By end of October, it will be a farm, and a former Bevchech guard will move in with his family. Treblinka ceased operations after the murder of the transport from Bialystok we saw a few weeks ago, and is also being turned into a farm. Chelmno is long closed, and Majdanek has returned to operating as mainly a labor and concentration camp, deadly, but no longer a mass murder facility. That makes Birkenau, or Auschwitz II, and its multiple murder factories, the crematoria, the only major extermination facility in full operation. On October 18th, 1,000 Jewish inmates from the labor camp at Savieci in occupied Upper Silesia arrive. 249 men and 152 women are selected for continued enslavement, and 599 are taken straight to the crematoria and murdered. On October 20th, a selection of 293 prisoners in quarantine camp B2A are murdered. On October 21, a transport from the Westerbork transit camp in occupied Netherlands arrives. 347 men and 170 women are enslaved and 490 murdered. On October 22nd, some 750 people of all ages arrive from Vitebsk, Belarus. They are randomly captured civilians taken as retribution for partisan activities they had no part in. Most of them will eventually be murdered or die from maltreatment, disease, or exhaustion. The same day, 1,260 in the women's camp are murdered in the crematoria to make room for less exhausted new arrivals. On October 23rd, the train carrying the 1,035 Roman Jews arrives. 149 men and 47 women are enslaved, the remaining 839 murdered. Only 16 of the enslaved will survive the war. The same day, 1,800 Polish Jews arrive from the concentration camp Bergen-Belsen. They are men, women, and children who, with the Gestapo's tacit acceptance, had acquired a variety of foreign nationalities, mostly from South American countries, against high sums of money. Until now, they have been held at Bergen-Belsen as potential bargaining chips for Nazi diplomacy. A few days ago, the SS Reichssicherheitshauptamt rescinded the recognition of their foreign national status and ordered them to Auschwitz. On arrival, all 1,800, many entire families, are murdered. That's a pretty normal week at Auschwitz by now. But after the Sobibor uprising, the Nazi leadership is both furious and scared, and the murders will continue to rise. Beyond the rebellious 600 prisoners at Sobibor, there are 45,000 more still alive in camps in the same region, the Lublin district. Fearing a spreading problem of resistance, Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler instructs head of the SS and police forces of the Generalgouvernement in occupied Poland, Friedrich Krüger, to order the head of the SS in Lublin, Jakob Sporenberg, to prepare an action for early November. A bit further to the east, in Minsk, Belarus, the liquidation of the ghetto has already begun and is completed this week. About 6,000 people of Jewish descent, ethnicity, or faith from the Minsk ghetto were murdered in Sobibor in September. The leaders of the Sobibor uprising were also taken from here, and many others have attempted to escape the ghetto to join the Soviet partisans. By October 1943, there are only about 2,000 people left in the ghetto. The ghetto is now cordoned off and surrounded by heavily armed guards. On October 21st, the SS and police enter the ghetto to arrest anyone remaining. They go house to house, dragging out anyone they catch. They throw hand grenades into potential hiding places and shoot whomever they can't arrest. The very, very few who manage to evade the search parties remain in hiding until it's safe to get out and flee the ghetto. The vast majority are arrested and taken to the Mali Trostenets camp outside of Minsk, where they are murdered in mobile gas vans. Another part of the German Nazi organized atrocities that have long become known to the rest of the world and now lead to the beginning of modern attempts to prosecute war crimes and crimes against humanity on an international level. On October 20th, 17 countries of the United Nations Alliance found the United Nations War Crimes Commission, UNWCC. It's tasked with collecting data on war crimes committed by the Axis powers during World War II, with the eventual goal of persecuting the perpetrators and enablers and collaborators. The body won't have any power to prosecute, but it will report to the national representatives who do. What they will not do is investigate potential war crimes by the United Nations Alliance members themselves. This week, another record is broken in the strategic bombing campaign to break the spirit of the German civilians. On October 18th, 360 Lancaster bombers raid Hanover. The raid is an operational failure, and most bombers miss the target in cloudy weather. The bombardment of Leipzig on the 20th is also disrupted by appalling weather conditions. 2 nights later, 569 RAF aircraft depart for Kassel. The bombers accurately hit their targets. Like in Hamburg this past summer, they succeed to launch a firestorm. As the fire rages through the burning ruins, the hurricane of flames, roaring down the streets, burns anyone caught above ground alive, sucks the air out of many shelters, and fills others with deadly carbon monoxide. Kassel is literally flattened. 155 industrial buildings are destroyed or badly damaged, as well as 78 public buildings, 38 schools, 25 churches, and 16 police and military installations, while 63% of Kassel's homes are rendered uninhabitable. Close to 6,000 people will be declared dead and 3,000 missing by the end of November. And while 9,000 is less than in Hamburg, it is a larger portion of the population, with 1 in every 25 civilians, 4.4%, losing their lives this night. Tens of thousands of individual lives ended or changed forever in a matter of hours. One of them is Oskar Spies, a 52-year-old barber. When the air sirens go off, he hides in a cellar below his building unit together with his neighbors and 7 relatives, including his wife, daughter, son-in-law, and grandson. At first, I had no idea that Kassel would be the target of a massive attack, and as the attack started, the building in Lower Königstrasse, which borders on ours, was immediately on fire. People came down carrying heavy suitcases, my family too. We had already carried down a laundry basket. We had thrown our coats and jackets in. I tried to loosen the bricks of the breakthrough to the building which was on fire, because I thought the people there could come over and take refuge with us. The people over there were already shouting through the first gaps. "We're dying in this cellar. We can't breathe for smoke." So those people fled into our cellar. They came with their hand luggage, but the lights had already gone out, and it was difficult to see what was happening. We worked by torchlight. Children had also come over into our cellar, taking the total number of people to roughly 70. Our house, too, was already on fire, so my son-in-law and I went back up to get the bedding from our flat on the first floor. And then an incendiary dropped into the chimney and got stuck there. The son-in-law returns to the cellar, while Oscar, with flames climbing up around him, tries to block the airflow to the incendiary by filling sand into the chimney. When this fails, he shouts down into the cellar that they all need to come out and follow him, but they are too scared. The incendiary is now stoking the flames and sucking in more and more air into the building. That in turn fans the flames. He tries again to quell the incendiary without success. When he returns to get everyone out of the cellar the third time, the flames block his way. He has to leave or be burnt alive. I wanted to try again to get to Jägerstraße through Gebirgsstraße, but the army forbade this, unfortunately. So I lay down on the square next to the gravestones under the trees. The central nave was on fire, and the fire brigade tried to protect the tower, which they managed to do, because otherwise the people there would have had to flee again. But where to? The following morning, Oscar makes his way back to his burnt-out apartment building. He and a neighbor clear a path through the rubble to the cellar door and break it open. And as we entered the cellar, we saw to our greatest sorrow that everyone in the cellar was stiff and dead. We carried 3 bodies out first. They were completely stiff. Our landlord was among the first we carried out. The people had all been sitting one next to the other, some on each other's laps, and had slowly gone to sleep, and they were lying there as if they were asleep. Now, the human body does not detect oxygen to regulate our breathing. It detects carbon dioxide building up in our blood and lungs and triggers our breathing reflex to rid the body of that gas. Though we get oxygen as a side effect of that reflex. Carbon monoxide doesn't trigger that reflex. A gradual buildup of the odorless gas kills us slowly. Before we go into systemic organ failure and die, we slip into unconsciousness when the brain is slowly depleted of oxygen, without the feeling of suffocation that comes when carbon dioxide builds up. That's why Oscar finds his neighbors, relatives, wife, son-in-law, daughter, and grandson in a state of peaceful, eternal sleep. His fellow Germans in the SS have murdered millions with the same gas and hydrogen cyanide in the gas chambers, but they experience something completely different. They know what is about to happen, triggering panic, and the gas builds up so fast that the physical effects like muscle cramps and seizures inflict the victims with excruciating pain before unconsciousness has time to set in. So, the relatively less painful death of the Germans in Kassel's shelters may look like poetic justice served in a more humane way. But is it justice? Is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth justice in the first place? Even if it is, have the guilty thus been punished? I can't tell you if Oscar the Barber was a Nazi. I don't know what his opinions were. I don't know if he voted for NSDAP and Hitler in 1932. I haven't researched if he failed to resist or even collaborated with the regime of his country. The same goes for his wife, daughter, son-in-law, and all the other adults in that cellar. But I can tell you this. His grandson and the other children who died with them had no agency in bringing about Nazism or the Nazi crimes. If we think that killing them is just retribution, or that it is the acceptable cost to punish their parents and grandparents, or even an acceptable cost to gain victory, or that they need to die simply because they are Germans and Germany is collectively guilty, are we not agreeing with what Himmler said in Posen a fortnight ago and will reiterate on December 16th? Thus, I have basically given the order to also kill the wives and children of these partisans and commissars. I would be a weakling and a criminal to our descendants if I allowed the hate-filled sons of the subhumans we have liquidated in this struggle of humanity against subhumanity to grow up. Never forget.